try to settle down. Excuse me, a little bit there. Okay, so this afternoon session is on a topic which is extremely important at the present day on the question of the understanding the global right-wing surge. We hope to have two speakers. Our first speaker is Kasper van der Burgh from the Communist Platform in the Netherlands, and he's been active in politics for 5 to 6 years and in the Communist Platform for the last year. And also we will have Lydia Apolinar from the Marxist Unity Group. Lydia's been here at Communist University before, and we're very happy to welcome her back. So I'm going to ask Kasper to speak first. He's going to take approximately half an hour, and then Lydia will follow with her presentation. Okay, thank you very much, Kasper.
So hi, everyone. I will first give some background on the Dutch situation of the far right. Up until recently, we had a far right government where the biggest party, the PVV, I think it's quite well known abroad with Geert Wilders. They were the biggest party. I think they were about a fifth of the electorate. So that's quite, in the Netherlands, that's quite big because we have a lot of different parties. The PVV has been around for quite a while now. They were actually originally a split from the major liberal right-wing party. And right now, or up until recently, because the government fell a couple months ago, they were in the government coalition in the cabinet. They are not the only far-right party, I would say. We also have a couple of other ones. One of them is Forum for Democracy, which is a lot more, I would say, a lot more extreme and a lot more ideologically motivated in their politics. They were quite big during the COVID lockdowns and stuff. But they shrunk afterwards, I think, because they did alienate a lot of people because people thought they were just a little bit too extreme and a little bit too much, a little bit crazy for a lot of people. One of their splits was Inentintos. They're framing themselves as a little bit more rational, a little bit more calm, but still hold many of the same extreme far right positions. There's also the SGP, which is a theocratic party that one's been around for ages. I don't know, maybe other comrades would know how long they've been around, but yeah, very long. But they're very, very conservative Christian. I think Reformed Christians. They have a very consistent voter base. I think they're a bit more in the main stage now because they're made a bit more acceptable by the other parties. But they're very, very strongly conservative. And I would say there's also a relevant one as well as the BBB, which is like a farmers advocacy party in a sense. I wouldn't class them personally as completely far right, but they are relevant to the far right movement in the Netherlands. What's interesting about these parties that they are very big electorally, so they have about total, I would say maybe about a third, maybe a bit less, but they have most of these parties don't have any active membership at all. For example, the PVV has only one member, which is the party leader. Even though it's the biggest party, no members at all. Some like the FVD or SGP have some active members, but it's, I don't know, I would say maybe about the same size as we are as the RSP, maybe about or just around that size. So it's not very big in active membership. So when we talk about the far right in the Netherlands as a very big movement, it's really only for voting and electorally and not necessarily party membership wise and actual organization. So we have had some moments of far-right organization in the Netherlands with around protest. The most important one, I would say, is the Farmers Defense Force and the farmers' protests. In 2009, it started in 2019 when the government wanted to instate more regulations on farmers, on their on like the nitrate runoff in livestock production, because as some might know, the Netherlands is a very big farming industry. I think we're one of the biggest ones in the world. It's so uh, there were a lot of the government announced a lot of regulations around it, which then caused massive protests by farmers that were very militant and uh, very big. So they would go with their tractors on highways to the political capital, to The Hague, and they would block the main roads, and uh, they were also, it was a very big disturbance for a lot of people, which the fact that protests disturb the so people that don't mind so much, but their background was like very like reactionary in that sense. They were also very would threaten politicians. I think they one time had a tractor with a coffin on the back of it where it had the name of I think the left party leader, and it, just that type of stuff. And I think they uh like try to break in with a tractor to in like a government house and stuff like that. I think the peak of that was like the around 2019, 2020, maybe the early 2020s. But died down a little bit, but they're still very much around. They were also very in their speech, they were also very not just anti-mainstream politician, but they would also link it to the left wing and climate activists. So it's very counter reaction to that. And they actually, I would say that their popularity, because they were not just popular among actual farmers, but they were also very like supported by a lot more right-wing minded people. And it kind of led to the foundation, I'd say, of the BBB, the party, the Farmers Party I just mentioned, which which is also very influenced by the agricultural lobby and anti-climate policy and the like. Another big right-wing movement was the anti-COVID protest movement, which happened obviously during the lockdowns in 2020, 2021. This was a direct response to governmental restrictions by the government. So we had like uh, we had the face mask mandates, banning of like closing public spaces. There was a curfew at one time, and that led to massive protest. At the time, this was actually very strongly suppressed by the government, where the protests by the Farmers Defense Force were not really restricted by the government too much. They were allowed to do a lot, so they would block highways and they would honestly be fine. But the anti-COVID protests were very violently suppressed by the government, which was supported uncritically as well by the mainstream left-wing parties. And also the broader like activist left would also support the government crackdown on anti-COVID protest. That protest movement has, I would say, almost completely died down. The people that are still active in it are now, I think, still part or hanging around the FAD type party. So but they're not like a significant group anymore, I would say. And more recently, there was a volunteer border control, which is, I think, was a small group of people living in a small town going to borders and checking for refugees. So they would stop random cars and ask, I don't know what they were exactly trying to do, but they would say, "But are you allowed to be here?" And I think they were basically attacking non-white people at the border, which is not great, but that's kind of new at this time. I don't think it's there's an organization or a real movement behind it right now. I think it's like that's just small groups. That movement is not really the government has not really responded to that in a sense. It's supported by the government parties. So I think Geert Wilders did respond to it on Twitter saying that he thinks it's great. But other than that, there's not been a crackdown there on that at all. I think, and there's a lot of panic on the left about this happening, I would say, about this type of stuff, and not I think there were calls by by a lot of left-wing groups to crack down and arrest all these people, but none of that's happened. So the situation in the Netherlands is that we have government parties supporting like having very right-wing ideologies with a lot of voters, but there's no actual organization behind it. So when we talk about the right wing, it's just government policy. It's not we should be scared in the street of right-wing militias attacking people in a sense, because it's just not happening, and there's no real there's not support of it in that sense. So and I'm going to talk about what I think is like why it is like that in the political climate in the Netherlands. So like many other places, like I think in the UK as well, and probably in Ireland to a point as well, in other European countries, there's been a complete or as much as possible a privatization of the private sector, which led to a like less social security. So there are real problems that most people are dealing with, like finding lack of housing, expensive healthcare costs, and high cost of living, stuff like that. And all of these policies and all this privatization was also very much supported by the left-wing parties that were also in power over, or sometimes in power in the last couple of years. I say left-wing, I mean what's considered left-wing by the general mindset of people. So I would say the Dutch Labour Party, for example, I would not call them really left, but they are people would class them as that. Um, the they supported all these policies and went into government with, for example, the Liberal parties, etc., and stuff like that. And what we see is like we see a complete turn to the right by all of the parties. So the left-wing parties go to the right by supporting the privatization of like the public sector, so public transport, healthcare, and stuff, and all that stuff. And by that, and then as well, the other right-wing parties also go way further to the right, and the other right-wing parties see a like a growth in dissatisfaction with the left as well, because the left completely abandoned the working class. So there's like a lot of distrust and like anger as well to the left. So the people turn more to the right, and then that just kind of trickles down where they just move further to the right and adopt policy. Was an interesting moment in Dutch politics 2 years ago when we had our last elections. It was a TV interview where the leader of the PVV, Geert Wilders, was on a panel, and the leader of the Labour Party was also on a panel, and they were talking about healthcare costs. The leader of the PVV said, "I want to abolish all deductibles in healthcare because we have to pay a certain amount of money every year if you use healthcare." They said, "We want to completely abolish it because the working people can no longer pay for it, and it's too expensive. It's too high of a cost." And the leader of the Labour Party said, "Well, actually, we want to just halve the deductibles. We don't want to abolish them. It's not possible. We can't do it." And then the the PVV, Geert Wilders, brought a woman on who said, well, actually, I can't afford it at all, and you're financially ruining me. You've abandoned all of us, and you don't support us. And I'm going to vote for this guy because he's going to abolish all the deductible fees, and he's going to do all these great things. He's going to give us houses. He's going to do this and that. Well, the mainstream left-wing parties absolutely refuse to take any real stance on this type of stuff. And I think that moment was I think it was a very good example of the way the politics look and the way the left wing looks at policy and the politics. So the reason I think he wanted to say we can't do it because he said it's not fiscally possible for us to get rid of the deductibles. It's not possible. Instead of actually, and I think in that he kind of also dismissed like this a concern that people really do have. And with the PVV, like they do promise these things. Like they were in government. I can tell you that the deductibles were not abolished. Like I think it's one of the first things that they completely let go of because they were in a coalition, and I think they never had any intention of actually doing this, but keep saying that they want to do this, but they never do it. So yeah, and there's not really any major left-wing parties that are relevant in the Netherlands right now as well. So there's not. I think the Socialist Party used to campaign a lot on around like cutting these costs more radically as well, but they've shrunk a lot, and they've also kind of done the same thing as the Labour Party did. But I think on a less big scale, there's also I think other issues in the Socialist Party as well. But this is just one of the things. So we see there's no real alternative, and there's no real willpower to actually take on these types of policies. And as so what we see is now is that we have very much a right-wing government, and there's a lot of people talking about it because a far-right government. We could say sure, that's true. But what we see is that they adopt like very common policies like that. I don't think the policies that have changed that much in the past 2 years than compared to like the previous, I don't know, 15 years, but probably could go back way longer. Nothing has really changed. What we see is that there is no fundamental change also from the politics of other parties that are also in the coalition, like the VVD, which is they call themselves the Liberal Party. They've been in government for the past, I don't know, 20, 30 years, like very long time. And their politics are very much still the same. It's still very pro-militarist. It's the privatization of sectors is still happening the same. And so they really just still in government, they still very much still maintain the norm, even though a lot of their criticism was always like anti-government, anti the parties that are in power, they're always doing that. And we see that they are very much now, the parties are just kind of all just continuing with like scapegoating minorities. So like immigration is a big issue within these parties. Like I think comrades would recognize that as a strategy, with that's like very much what they do, but it's not they're not really doing anything about that either. And I think they could not, but so it's just kind of just continuing of the same thing. And on the left, we don't really see a decent response to this. So we see in the Netherlands, there's protests every month or every 3 months, massive protest against the PVV and against the fascism of the PVV, because they do call it all fascist, obviously. But it's not really anything massive is changing, which is, I think, a big thing. So, and their strategies are not changing on the left. I think we're trying to, like with the RSP, we're trying to offer an alternative for left-wing organizations to actually fill that gap with what we see with other parties. They will I think because the PVV has been around for about 20 years, so even before they were in power, they like someone like IST would print newspapers every week calling Wilders a fascist and the Netherlands is turning fascist. I still think they have signs from 20 years ago from Geert Wilders against him that they still bring to protest. You can actually see that the signs are just the exact same if you look at the same pictures. So the strategies on the left are exactly the same. There's no one's offering a solution aside from just, I guess, calling, yeah, just going out to the street and shouting a little bit, but there's no real organization rather than that. I think for now, I'll leave it at that, and the rest I'll tackle on the questions, I think.
Okay, so now, thank you very much for that, Kasper. We'll move to hear from Lydia Apolinar, who is based in the United States, the Marxist Unity Group. Can you unmute yourself and turn on your camera, Lydia? Can you unmute yourself and turn on your camera, Lydia? We're just waiting for you. She's there. Okay, great. Okay, I'll let you give your talk now. Thank you, Lydia.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. And that was a really fascinating presentation to listen to learn more about the situation in the Netherlands as well. So I guess I'll just get into the presentation. So in the situation in the US, of course, the kind of pressing question is going to be the Trump and as well as just the MAGA movement in general, since they might not, there might be kind of a divergence happening between parts of the MAGA movement as well as with Trump himself. So I think from the very beginning, by the way, is the audio okay just before I start talking more? I think from the very beginning, there was kind of this idea of Trump as the departure from normal politics, or what people kind of saw as normal American politics. There was even kind of this idea of the potential for the Constitution, basically the constitutional order, to be challenged. And I think there was always somewhat of a right-wing challenge to the kind of limited democratic aspects of the constitutional order, which kind of has led people on the left to sometimes take this kind of defensive position with regards to the Constitution itself. I think when it comes to the first campaign, there was definitely this kind of skepticism that Trump would be able to win. I saw a lot of people that thought it was kind of some sort of elaborate performance art and that he would in the end drop out, and just kind of like facing the reality that this would be the future of the Republican Party, at least, and that this would be something that people would seriously have to contend with in politics. And then you definitely saw the rise of a lot of these really far right movements that would embrace white identitarianism as well around this time. But when it comes to the first term, there definitely were some limitations on Trump in terms of his actual actions. Similar to with this term as well, there's a discrepancy between what he's saying in the campaign and then what he's doing in practice, as with almost any politician, but in some really remarkable ways, especially with regards to foreign policy. In the first term, there was already this talk about not wanting to constantly be involved in foreign wars, not wanting to spend this money that should be going towards regular people in America on these foreign interventions. And then in practice, it was actually quite an interventionist presidency in many ways, with things like pulling out of the Iran deal, causing all of this unnecessary unnecessary conflict with Iran when they assassinated Soleimani, and then blocking a bill that would have prevented, basically Trump had vetoed a bill that would have prevented arms sales to Saudi Arabia for bombing Yemen at the time as well. Not pulling out of any of these forever wars that he had talked about, like not pulling out of Afghanistan. And then in addition to that, of course, there's just the constant unwavering support for Israel that has been a constant both on the Democratic and the Republican side of politics. And that seems like something that just will never, that just cannot change in terms of the way that both parties approach Israel. Especially when it comes to Trump, it seems like he was, it seems like there was this influence from people like Sheldon Adelson, Miriam Adelson, who had been his largest campaign donors and who had played basically kind of strongly influenced his decision to declare Jerusalem the capital of Israel, to move the embassy to Jerusalem. And then recently there was that report that basically Miriam Adelson had said you had donated $100 million to Trump's campaign in 2024 and said with basically the understanding that he would allow Israel to completely annex the West Bank as well. So that is another concerning element. I think in the first term, there were definitely some more constraints on the consolidation of authoritarian power, especially when it comes to trying to use the military for somewhat kind of as like a personal army for his own, having like more loyalty to the presidency in a really direct and personal sense. There was the time that he was talking about really having this full military mobilization in response to the Black Lives Matter protests. And then at least one of the generals that was involved said that it was not representing a clear threat of a riot or large civil violent disturbances or something like that. And then when it came to LA, it seems like when it comes to LA, there was just this statement that was like, well, there's a threat that it can become a large enough civil disturbance. So it just kind of becomes this really subjective thing of when they determine what the threat level is. And I mean, you can see these threats to rights like freedom of speech, not only in the United States, but also definitely I've been following the situation in the UK with like Palestine Action and it seems like there definitely is this trajectory towards challenging these basic rights like freedom of speech in the US when it comes to specifically using deportations to target people that are criticizing Israel. That has been extremely concerning as well. And then when it comes to these mass deportations, that was one of the things that Trump definitely talked about in his first when he was running the first time as well as the second time. And he was, of course, able to accomplish many violent deportations in his first term as well. But really the scale of the mass deportations is something that he has been able to do this term, and something that has been so violent and so people can really see the destructive nature of it, that really like 90%, the vast majority of people that they're deporting and oftentimes holding indefinitely in really inhumane conditions are not criminals whatsoever, but people that are just trying to work in this country. And I think even a lot of the people that had supported mass deportations kind of, it lost popularity once people saw what that's like in reality. But it's still, I would say, yeah, there's been also a lot of developments recently within the far right on the US that have been kind of like defeating this idea of the right being so unified. I think there's always kind of been this idea that the right is extremely unified in comparison to left, who has all these divisions. I think some of the divisions on the right are definitely coming out more, especially when it comes to interventionism, when it comes to supporting Israel unconditionally. That is definitely something that the right has had to contend with people like Candace Owens or Marjorie Taylor Greene, or even like Tucker Carlson, just criticizing Trump over both his endless support for Israel as well as the things like the intervention in Iran. Um, and I'm not entirely sure where things will go with the right. If there will be this increasing fragmentation, if that will be a significant problem for like if Trump becoming more unpopular as a politician also, is that going to necessarily prevent the right from growing? I can't say that I have the answers to these questions, but we're definitely seeing a lot of things play out right now. Then I definitely think there's also just this added context with everything that's going on right now, the genocide that's happening, that there's definitely kind of this sense that both just the horror of it in itself and the fact that both the Democratic presidency and now the Republican presidency have basically inverted everything that you would expect to be any kind of moral reasoning in saying that what they need to do is defend the country that is committing the genocide. But that has been definitely a constant in American politics, at least in my lifetime, that there has been this uncritical support, even compared to like past administrations like Reagan or other right-wing leaders who had at least said something like put a stop to Israel bombing Lebanon in some cases while still supporting its overall goals. There's definitely no restraint whatsoever, and that is not something that will just stay in Gaza as well. I think it's also just expanding the horizon for what an acceptable level of political violence is in terms of I think it definitely makes politicians more bold in blatantly disregarding any kind of rights and freedoms, and just as well as just the violence that's going on in terms of the mass deportations. I think there also is, in terms of a response from the left. So there's been a few different main responses from people on the left when it comes to responding to especially some of the challenges. So Mug definitely talks a lot about the limitations on the fact that we don't really live in a democratic society, and that there's many limitations on democracy in the Constitution itself. There's been, I feel like, a few different responses to the fact that the right is challenging some of the basically just some of the protections that are supposed to be when it comes to like freedom of speech or freedom of assembly, things that are worth defending, absolutely, without necessarily attaching yourself to defending the Constitution as a whole, or stopping yourself from making that challenge simply because it's made on the right for different reasons, where the reasons for the right challenging the Constitution are because they don't even see because they see the limited democratic rights that people have as being something that is a roadblock to more authoritarian forms of power, as opposed to seeing it many aspects of the Constitution as a block to people actually being represented by tribunes of the people that have to be accountable to democratic processes. When it comes to responding, I definitely think we can see some of the main problems that come about from some forms of response to the growing threat of authoritarianism. There's been many problems from people within the Democratic Party, including within what people call progressivism. Things like, well, recently there was the vote on trying to prevent money from going towards the supposedly defensive capabilities of Israel, and that was actually led by someone from the far right in the US. But people like AOC had basically defended aiding Israel in terms of what they call defensive aid, which still allows them to continue the genocide without having any kind of, basically you can't really separate defensive military aid from supposedly defensive military aid from offensive military aid. That has definitely been an issue in general within the left, that there's been a lot of effort put behind supporting candidates that are not necessarily accountable to any kind of organized socialist movement. And I think that's what MUG tries to focus on, is trying to build an organized socialist movement that has elected officials that are accountable to the organized socialist movement, and not just to supporting people and then hoping that they will have good instincts in politics, that they'll stick to the principles that they've talked about. Instead, trying to build up electoral discipline and have organization that is capable of acting like a party in terms of being a representative of the organized working class. And I think that's basically all I really have to say. I know it was a bit jumbled together since it's like 5 a.m. right now here, but I really appreciate being asked to speak in this panel. Thank you so much.
Wow, thanks for getting up so early for us, Lydia. I know you have to leave at our time 3, which is your time 6, I think, is it? So I'll bring you back to respond at about 10 minutes before then, so you can come back on the questions that I'm sure will be raised. So thank you both for very interesting insights into the far right in the states where you live, and I'm going to ask people to indicate. Okay, so hang on 1 second. So okay, so I'll just take, there's a number of hands, so I'd ask people, because we've really only got maybe 40 minutes, so if you could keep it to 5 minutes at the longest. Ian?
Mine's even shorter. I just want to ask a question. Could you give me some sort of outline about the relative popularity or otherwise among the general population, the working class, towards the attitude towards immigrants, and in particular, for example, mass deportations? And could you also give some indication of what the ruling class feels about the mass deportations and generally hostile attitudes towards immigrants?
Okay, thanks. So I'm just going to read out the list of names I have so that you can tell me if your name isn't on it. I have Colin, Jim, Olaf, Jack, and Mike. Anybody else? Oh, I know, they're just still, I'm not, okay, don't expect to be called in that order. But I will take Colin next.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it.
So let's get back to it, speak to people as well. Yeah, I'm not living voice like you.
Yeah. What?
Yeah, maybe just that next to
Okay, yeah, I'll keep it really short as well. Colin Turner from the Communist Platform in the Netherlands, and thanks for the input a lot, but I want to sort of like with, well, not really a contradiction, but maybe an extra word to what Kasper said, because I think, yes, the point stressed out that policies are not really changing a lot, and especially the specific form of a PVV that always frames itself very much as a sort of workers' racist party, and we have social policies, and I think the practice has seen that they haven't got that whatsoever, and they didn't even bother to hide out that they're not doing anything of what they promised on that side. But I think one thing what has actually changed a lot, or there are two things what actually have changed with the far right government, what was taken over or took over from a right-wing government, is, well, first of all, I think the discourse, the public discourse has actually got more vile within the last year, especially on aspects of minority rights. And actually, the only politics they have managed to change is that the Netherlands has now passed one of the most repressive immigration law packages ever. For instance, it's now a criminal act to be undocumented. It is a criminal act to give even humanitarian support to undocumented people. At least that package has been gone through the normal parliament. It still has to get through the sort of Senate firm. And we hope to maybe stop that there. Yeah, so I think there are smaller aspects, but very much only on the repressive side, what have actually changed. And I think also I think that is sort of a problem, that is also something what's going to stay. So even if it's very electoral based as such, the right-wing surge in the Netherlands, I think way more than in the US or in some of the other countries, or if you look at Germany, for instance, where you do have sort of organized party structures and organized people on the streets, you have it way less in the Netherlands, as far as we can see, I think. But you have had a massive change on debate that even the so-called left parties, the bourgeois left parties in parliament, actually all go up. And when it's about migration, one after the other actually says that they are all in favor for not letting any more immigrants in and restricting. And as it so often is, of course, I mean, I don't know if you know the fact, but there is very, very high immigration, has been for decades in the Netherlands, mainly pushed actually from the demands of capital for having cheap labor and also having high educated people. So, of course, what have they cracked down on? They've cracked down on people who need humanitarian support, and they've cracked down on students coming in. And, of course, the demands of the capital of, for instance, having educated people, they've done exactly the opposite because they just cut down the education system at the same time. Yeah, so that just maybe as an extra, and I apologize, I might have to go a bit.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Jack?
Yeah.
I thought I had a words.
Fish can hear you online.
What?
So people can hear you online.
What was that?
Oh,
Okay, standing here.
Yes,
Okay.
all right.
Hello, comrades. Oh, you're standing there, aren't you? Okay, anyway, I think we need to put this in the context, in a global context of, use an old phrase, neoliberalism or liberalism, and how should I put it? I don't know whether you want to say, post the financial crisis or something like that, the failure of neoliberalism as far as masses of workers are concerned. So deindustrialization, attacks on trade union strength. So I think we need to locate it something like in that context.